We're a team of 6 students from the Carnegie Mellon Futurist Club. We're a student organization at CMU focused on creating transdisciplinary and transgenerational spaces to explore important concerns and ideologies surrounding the future. We aren't here to predict the future, but rather explore the multiplicity and complexity of futures to pose critical questions and implications about the present. I'm Serena, the president of the club. I'm a master's student in human-computer interaction, also known as HCI.
Hi, I'm Aaron, and I'm an undergrad studying fine arts and human-computer interaction.
Hi, I'm Grana, and I'm an undergraduate studying architecture and human-computer interaction.
Hello, I'm Neela. I'm a master's student studying integrated innovations for products and services.
Hi, I'm Sachi. I'm studying product and service innovation.
My name is Victoria, and I'm an undergrad studying mechanical and biomedical engineering.
In today's presentation, we'll start by showing you the final project we created and then work backwards, diving into our methodology to approach the research question. We'll share in depth the concept and future world building and the design rationale behind it. We'll also share our research methodology, or how we collected and synthesized key insights for our client, NSR, along with next steps and final takeaways gleaned from the experience. This semester, our team worked on a client project for Pittsburgh-based nonprofit New Sun Rising, or NSR. NSR's mission is to build vibrant communities that center equity and prioritize mutual success for all community members. They do this by helping other organizations and groups with funding, capacity building, and data utilization. NSR asked us to explore the question, what are the futures of vibrant communities? To address this question, we created an experiential future, or an installation where participants are invited to actively participate in the future. The event was held in the bottom level of Community Forge, a community center in Wilkinsburg. Over 40 attended the event, with guests composed of NSR clients, board members, and the wider CMU community. Through a series of ideation sessions, we conceptualized a future we and NSR agreed would be the most interesting type to explore and receive community feedback. One where small organizations and nonprofits face heavy resistance from government and oppressive institutions, to the point their work becomes unsanctioned and underground. From that story, we captured a small slice and brought it to life with the installation. This slice of the future was called People's Vertex, a secret community gathering space for people and orgs to exchange help and share a sense of camaraderie. After experiencing People's Vertex, participants were then guided to reflect on their experience. That data was given to NSR to feed into their ongoing data collection regarding the hopes, fears, and expectations the Pittsburgh community has concerning the future.
To execute our vision for the final installation, we went through an exhaustive process of research and design. We conducted 6 semi-structured hour-long interviews with nonprofit leaders and synthesized results with an affinity diagram to identify major themes. We wanted to understand what are the current motivations, frustrations, and joys of nonprofit work. We first began by writing out important quotes or phrases mentioned during each of the interviews. We then grouped them together by similarities and overarching categories that we defined as community and existing need, longevity and sustainability, the landscape of Pittsburgh, and responses to resistance, responses to unprecedented futures, and accessing resources. These highlighted the issues and goals addressing 3 states of time, the past, present, and future. Using those insights, we were able to see where these organizations saw the future success of their operations and what they would need in order to get there. It also helped us land on what features would make that future dystopian versus utopian. We also used the interviews to identify signals and drivers of the future. Signals are concrete evidence and instances that occur in today's world that signal how the future is headed. Drivers are long-term trends that affect the future. Among the signals, we found local efforts and elderly involvement were strong evidence that the future of vibrant communities were headed in a direction of smaller scale and greater individual involvement. Long-term drivers that would also affect vibrant communities included technological advancements and the lack of funding. We also found a significant tension between the autonomy of an organization and the freedom to work versus the institutionalization of organizations that provide security and a sense of permanence. These signals and drivers are reflected in the questions posed in the post-experience reflection and greatly influenced our discussions of future scenarios. We then moved into futures frameworks to design potential future scenarios and compare them to one another. We facilitated multiple feedback sessions with NSR and our advisors along the way to determine which future scenarios would yield the most valuable discussion and data for NSR. We used the major themes from the interviews as launching pads for creating the scenarios by looking at both pain points and success points. We used the Experiential Futures ladder as a framework to guide our ideation process. Each team member came up with 2 scenarios, one positive and one negative regarding the nonprofit landscape in Pittsburgh. We presented these to NSR and found they were most interested in the ones that focused on centralizing resources, such as the one future where physical spaces are dedicated to large and complex problems, so different groups can meet in those areas to collaborate. And it also provides a sense of permanence, not to any one group, but to the cause as a whole. NSR also found interest in scenarios where nonprofits are marginalized by the institutions rejecting them. And as a result, they either lose their places in the metropolis as blacklisted organizations or changing to mimic the issues of large corporations in pursuit of greater impact. We expanded on these top scenarios using a framework called the Futures Wheel. Doing these diagrams helped flesh out a fuller version of the world the scenarios existed in, so we can think about how this future impacts society from a social, technological, ecological, economical, and a political way that may be interesting for participants to be prompted about. As seen as in this example, we started with a scenario in the center, then we noted the first order impacts directly caused by it, then one layer out are the second order impacts, and then the third order impacts.
Moving to world building, we debated showing multiple futures versus one future. In order to emphasize NSR's interest in how individuals contribute to vibrancy, we ultimately decided to pursue one scenario where nonprofits and other grassroots organizations face heavy resistance from the system, to the point where their work can be described as back alley and stigmatized. They face resistance because their work to create equitable and mutually flourishing communities clashes with capitalist agendas and dominating power structures. Consequently, hidden community spaces form to secretly counter societal restrictions and systemic barriers put in place to slow down their work. One such gathering space is People's Vertex, modeled off and inspired by speakeasies. Small details of this future emerged when creating its artifacts, such as the new intensified climate migration. These details present themselves in subtle nudges throughout the experience. A participant's experience, for instance, is as follows. They enter through a door on the side of the building, plastered by eviction notices, indicating the area has been closed off due to overdue rent. When they open the door, they are greeted by a bouncer who onboards first-time guests. They are set up with special physical IDs and are told not to worry since they are non-traceable. So when they scan their ID at certain tablets for services to be transferred, the government and police won't know. While waiting for their cocktail or mocktail, they find a screen projected on the wall, tracking police cars and monitoring activity on the streets. Just in case a police car gets too close, for instance, and evacuation procedures need to take place. Turning from the bar, the participant notices menus scattered around, notifying them of various special services offered tonight, courtesy of donations from other People's Vertex patrons and partners. One such service is to hack into coveted, gate-kept databases in order to obtain basic data needed to empower organizations. They join a chat with other patrons, contribute to the collective graffiti wall, and examine posters strewn across the walls. Posters range from asking people to upcycle their AirPod 14s to recruiting translators for an act helping refugees who had to leave their homes due to climate change. Finally, guests end their evening at the photo booth where they take a headshot with digital fashion filters to be used for Dada and other corporate job applications. A participant then returns to the present to go through the 2 reflection exercises. We'll now move into the design rationale behind the major artifacts we created.
As mentioned, participants were given IDs in this experience. The inspiration of the IDs came from EBT cards that are used to load funds that are distributed by the government to those eligible for public assistance benefits. In a place like People's Vertex, all of the benefits or services offered by nonprofit partners are integrated into a single identification card. These identification cards represent 6 sectors: health, education, technology, arts and entertainment, culture, environment, and social work. These identifications are chosen by interest. Before our final iteration of these IDs, we were first planning to ideate potential futuristic ID cards, and separately, we were considering using charms as a way to indicate the different services that were provided by the nonprofits. These 2 elements were then integrated. Laser-cut acrylic charms were how we realized these identification cards in the speakeasy. In the exhibit, participants chose 2 charms that represented the causes that they cared about. These themes were then used to prompt the participant to consider what services nonprofit organizations would offer in that specific industry in the future. These charms interface with the digital elements of our exhibit, and the services that are offered by nonprofit partners get uploaded to these identification cards.
The police tracking UI was created to show protection measures for unauthorized gathering spaces like People's Vertex and alert members to hostile police and government presence. It also doubled as a futuristic smart home setup, indicating temperatures which were characterized by global warming in the future, and providing advice when a police car gets too close to the venue. The biggest challenge was how to make the interface futuristic, unique, and dissimilar to modern UIs. We originally designed our notifications similarly to how MacBooks receive texts, but ultimately evolved it to a scrolling list that suddenly changes to a bright, flashing warning. This design had a more dramatic, effective impact on the severity and urgency of the warning, and its unique display made sure participants wouldn't be confused if they were still in the present. The screen designs were first created in Figma and then animated via Adobe After Effects.
For the exhibition, the digital interface of the menu and physical printed copies were also created to promote the narrative of the speakeasy. Several tablets were used to display the Figma prototype during the Experiential Futures event, and people were allowed to interact with them using their ID keychains given at the beginning of the experience. Small half-letter size menus were also scattered across the bar space, giving visitors ample opportunities to read and digest the different services. The menu of special underground services offered cover a range of sectors, from technological advancements to services offered in the social and health sectors. The services were featured in this personalized manner through the scanning of the ID, which was curated to prime guests and allow them to consider how individuals can add vibrancy to their communities in ways in which one could be doing so through special services in the setting we've created. For reference, here is the final prototype that guests interacted with. By default, guests in the speakeasy would be able to see a selection of services, which they can interact with by tapping into each of the services and scanning their IDs when prompted to. There will be a short processing time as their IDs are scanned for selected services, followed by a confirmation screen with more detailed information on the service and what is being offered. Based on the branding of People's Vertex, a simple design system was created for the UI and menu of services. UI serves as an interactive and futuristic medium between curated services and users, while also role-playing the possibilities of future narratives and work offered by patrons of the bar. The experience was also intended to provide some believability in ordering and acquiring such services, while tying the narrative of exclusive underground services through special personalized tokens.
The main aim of the posters created for the experience was to set the scene to emulate the future. While it contributed to the overall ambience of people's Vertex, on closer inspection, it gave into the details of how life, nonprofits, and vibrant societies could widely exist in the future. This is where people would come to see what's new, seek jobs, avail services, and do much more. The two main areas where we used posters were on the bulletin wall indoors and at the entrance outdoors. The ones outdoors were cautionary in nature and by design. Their purpose was to alert the speakeasy visitors before they made their entry. One example is a poster that warned people to turn off their locations on devices to prevent tracking by authorities. We used dark and somber colors and imagery to convey the message better. This poster was also translated into other languages like Hindi and Chinese to show how the future is multicultural. The ones indoors were more hopeful and bright and spoke about 3D food printing, robo-nanny daycares, airport recycling collection drives, and other services that one might be able to access in the future. One such example is this poster that advertises lab-grown food that is available for pickup. In the future, we envision a rise in consumption of superfoods like insects and legume meat grown in labs in the face of food shortage. The visual style here is vibrant and light, supported by realistic images. We focused on making the poster wall look authentic by using an eclectic style, varied dimensions, and by arranging them on the walls in a haphazard but careful manner.
The photo booth was how we envisioned the futuristic job search and application process. Current NGOs sometimes offer services that can help you get a suit, photo, etc., so that you can apply and attend job interviews. We wanted to spin and offer this underground option where people could come and get their corporate headshot. We first began by designing a futuristic suit in Photoshop to then load into Spark AR, a software used for making Instagram-compatible filters. This would attach the suit to the person when using the Instagram app. We also used filters under the futuristic tag on Instagram. These ranged from face augmenting filters to neon color filters to help further situate the photos with the backdrop of the posters in general futuristic settings. We then printed the photos using a photo printer that gave passport-sized photos, and we put them in a custom photo folder to show how and mimic how passport or professional photos are given, and then we gave them to the attendees.
For the branding of People's Vertex, we began by looking at different visual styles and languages to communicate a range of themes we've previously identified and brainstormed. On our mood board, we mapped out ways we could visually represent a sense of repression and resistance to something more hopeful and light. Visually, we looked at more grunge, experimental, and anti-design visual styles to more colorful, playful, and modern styles with chrome, nature-like elements. We did some low fidelity explorations to the logo in grayscale, focusing on clean and minimal shapes. A simple illustrative style was also adopted to maintain a sleek and modern speakeasy look. The stars and sparkles were added to build a sense of playfulness and add a lighthearted touch to the branding. We also wanted it to be bold yet minimalist in its design, which were explored through the main typeface selected, heavy and blocky, slightly different from the rest of the lines and shape. Some explorations of typography and font pairing was also done in order to create a consistent visual language across various artifacts and speakeasy. Finally, after several discussions, we finalized the logo, font pairings, as well as the color palettes. The branding of the speakeasy of People's Vertex, we wanted the vibrancy and diversity of speakeasy to be apparent in the colors, encompassing a deep aqua blue, lime green, and neon pink. Using these simple branding guidelines that were created, other artifacts in speakeasy was also built from there.
So let's now take a look at how we created the physical space. The space we used was originally a gym, so we had to make a big transformation to the space to reflect the future and get people immersed into the idea that they were really in People's Vertex. We used string lights throughout and a large people vertex sign to give a speakeasy's feel. The sign was created with rigid foam core and L-shaped connections to stand itself up. Spray painted boards were placed along the sides to divide one side of the room as people's vertex and the other side as the reflection room. Electro swing music played in the background, adding a futuristic spin to the speakeasy's feel. The entire experience required roleplay to really bring people into the future. There are roles that the team played, including bartender, bouncer, photo booth operator, and someone who floats around to chat with people. If someone asks these team members what's going on, they have to provide a response that doesn't overly explain the situation, but provide enough context to make people believe that they are really in the future. We started the evening following our original dialogue plan, but some guests were initially resistant and skeptical, so we had to make some changes on the fly. For example, the bouncer's dialogue shifted so it was more explicit. Upon entry that acquired anything, the people's vertex were no longer active unless you return to the present. This helped our visitors accept the idea of entering and therefore immersing themselves in the future.
After going through the whole experience, participants are led back to the present to reflect on the future they just interacted with. There are two stations for reflection. The intention of the first station was to get the gut reaction of the participants. Pink and blue stars correlated to a belief that the future was mostly bright or mostly dark, respectively. These stickers were placed along a graph of where they believed the success of vibrant communities lie. The horizontal axis maps a spectrum from working within versus around institutions. The vertical axis is the spectrum of work done on a local scale versus a national scale. Our results showed that 28 people thought the future was relatively dark compared to 18 who thought it was bright. The majority found vibrant communities to be situated in local scale work that went around institutions. The second station allowed for further reflection and included double-sided cards. The front side asked what people's hopes, fears, and expectations for the future were, given their current involvement in the community. The backside had blank space to elaborate on their answer. These cards were given to NSR to do analysis. This analysis will add to their ongoing research and surveys of Pittsburgh communities' hopes, fears, and expectations for the future. NSR has expressed interest in replicating this experience for other stakeholders. These are our recommendations for alternative experiences. When considering moving people's vertex to another location, the key attributes to look for are a room with two sections for function, and a more secluded place for world building. A space with two sections is necessary to accommodate the speakeasy and the reflection area of the experience. While room dividers can be used, separate spaces might be easier to achieve the dim ambient lighting needed in the speakeasy while having the necessary lighting for patrons to write on the reflection cards. The secluded area will help develop the most important aspect of the world building, that the activity at people's vertex is illicit. This is a detail of the story that needs to be established before participants enter the establishment so that they're able to identify this location as being a speakeasy. If the people's vertex is to move to be a virtual experience, the backstory of the establishment needs to be amended. If the services were to be offered over Zoom, it would be very easy for the government to track the organization's internet activity. In this world, nonprofit services would not be considered illicit. Rather, they would have to resort to a telecommunication platform due to the lack of resources to rent a physical space, a problem that we noticed in our interviews. In this world, the community is so apathetic to the efforts of nonprofits and grassroots organizations that donations are rarely made and there is little participation in these organizations.
All in all, we found that most were receptive to suspending their disbelief and entering the future. We were surprised at how many people actively immersed themselves in the event and were willing to bend their thinking to truly experience people's vertex. Carefully setting up the environment and role play largely contributed to our success. Futures installations are still a very new concept, and a challenge with delivering experiential futures centers on how much we can show participants there in the future without telling them explicitly while still avoiding confusion. Our biggest takeaway from working on this project was learning how to stretch our creative thinking. There were many times we were stumped because coming up with an idea for the future is so broad, it's easy to be paralyzed by the task. This is where frameworks played a major role because constraints help generate creativity. A future scenario didn't have to be perfect. It just had to exist as a starting point for conversation. The more we could narrow our thought process with specific and unexpected constraints, such as forcing ourselves to come up with a tool that exists in the future, but that must be dystopian, related to healthcare, and used by people above 60 years old, the more interesting our ideas became, which in turn made people more intrigued to examine that future. This is why it's important to us that we're clear about not predicting or guessing the future. This project wasn't a statement, but rather a question of what if this were the future, why would it exist, and what would that mean to you? We hope we shared how powerful the future is as a tool, prop, and experience to think critically and tactically about the present. As a club, we are so excited to continue pursuing this type of work. This project was made possible with the help of many people along the way. We'd like to thank Scott Wolovich from New Sun Rising, Michelle Walker from Walker Philanthropic Consulting, and the rest of the NSR team for guiding us through their vision and being such wonderful clients to work with. We would also like to thank our advisors Adam Cowart and Keith Webster for providing excellent advice and feedback. Community Forge for accommodating all of us with your venue, Abile Voyant Tea Company for creating delicious cocktails and mocktails for our event, and giftwrap.ai for sponsoring a giveaway for our event participants. If you have any questions about this project or would like to propose one yourself, feel free to contact us at cmufuturistclub@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening.